Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me for this video. So I often get asked the question, which album do I own the most copies of? And the first time that I got asked that, I really had to stop and think. But since that time, I kind of keep track of it now because it is kind of interesting, all the different versions that are out there and for what reason you might want to have multiple copies of an album, whether it's remastered, remixed, box set type versions, stuff like that. There's any number of different types out there that can make owning an album, multiple copies of an album, a sure thing. And so I actually went through my collection and I pulled out 6 of them. We're going to jump into that here in just a bit. But before we do, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like. All those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this with an episode about which albums I own the most copies of. And I'm sure after this video, you're gonna have your own ideas and probably realize that you too own multiple copies of the same album and for what reasons, those will be pretty interesting. But we're gonna jump into this. We're gonna start off and we're gonna do it alphabetical. And the first one up is the one that I actually usually answer as the one that I have the most copies of. Def Leppard Hysteria, an absolutely phenomenal album in my opinion. It was one of the first cassettes I ever had, and I don't have that cassette any longer, otherwise I would actually be showing you that here with this. And I also used to own an earlier non-remastered copy of it in CD, so I should have that one, but I don't. But we're starting with this one, and it's a remastered copy. It's one of the newer ones. But they did a 20th anniversary edition of it, 2 CD copy here. Deluxe edition, has a bunch of bonus tracks and things on the second disc of it, and it's cool. Gatefold version of this thing that opens up and has a great booklet and everything. So they do a 20th anniversary edition of this. Then after that, they do a live album of it, Viva Hysteria, performed live in Las Vegas. So of course, had to add that to the collection. Following that, we get the Super Deluxe Edition box set version of it that has, gee whiz, 5 CDs and 2 DVDs inside this thing. So of course I add that to the collection, but that's not it. It doesn't stop there because they started issuing these, the CD collection volumes, this one being volume 1, and of course it has a copy of Hysteria right there in it. So, and it's an individual disc that's in here. So there you go, another copy of Hysteria. This time done like the album in gatefold style. So that's kind of cool, a little bit different there. I don't necessarily need the individual albums that are within this, but I get that. And so, in this, just this right here, there are 5 versions of that. But in the past, I've also owned an additional CD and an additional cassette. So that one there, I've owned at least 7 copies of that album. So far, there's probably going to be more remastered and collections and things of that nature. That number will keep going up, I guess. Another one that I realized that I didn't think of until I decided I was going to film this video and I started going through my collection and pulling stuff out was The Doors, LA Woman. And so there's actually a disc before this, just a standard edition of this that I don't have. This one here is actually one that has the remixes on it that Ray Manzarek got involved, and they would pull out different takes of things and decided to edit differently, do a different guitar solo, have an intro on it that didn't exist on the album. And so they did these back in 2007, and at that time, the regular editions of the album were taken off the market, so you could only get those remixes. And at that time, I did have a copy of a standard edition of the album, so I was cool with that, didn't mind that. Since that time, a 40th anniversary edition of the album came out with a bonus disc on it of unreleased tracks, so I got rid of that one, but I now have this one that has the original, and then I've got the remix version. But when the 50th anniversary rolled around, they put this one out. And not that I didn't need another copy of it, because I get the CD and I get a vinyl in here, but I get a bonus CD of unreleased tracks that's different than the unreleased tracks in here. So 3 copies here, but again, I have owned at least 4 copies of this one so far. All right, moving on to the next one here. And the reason I'm wearing my Kiss Destroyer shirt is because this is another one that I've got multiple copies of. In fact, Got a remastered copy, still sealed in plastic, from CD Warehouse. If you guys remember that place, this was $9.99. Good deal, picked it up. And at that time, I owned another copy of this, just a standard edition of it. And I have to say, Destroyer's not one of my favorite albums by Kiss, so I probably didn't open it for that reason. It's just one of those ones I tend to pass up and jump on other albums. I love Love Gun and Unmasked and Dynasty. I know that's not a popular one, but I love those. So I've got this one of the remasters. Then they put out the resurrected edition of it with the original album art on it and slightly different mix to the album. One of the songs on here has a different guitar solo. And there you can see the two different album covers. So of course I picked it up for that. Then we got the 45th anniversary edition of it and a 2-CD one. So of course that's in the collection. And now that I've got this one here, which is the original on it, I'll probably never open this one. So that's again one of the reasons why that one in and of itself is not opened. But I also picked up the massive box set version of this. And I didn't pick it up because I love Destroyer again. It was because of the bonus rare tracks that were in here. So they're getting me to buy the album again for the other stuff, not actually because I love the Destroyer album that's in here. And so this is 4 CDs and a Blu-ray audio, so a 5-disc box set that was really expensive when it came out. But in all, 4 versions of this album that, again, I had another copy of it at one time, so probably 5 copies total that I've owned of the Kiss Destroyer. And we're coming up on the Creatures of the Night box set that's getting ready to come out, I think, next week. So that's another one that I've already got multiple editions of, and in time we'll probably have even more. Moving on to one of my favorite bands, if not the favorite band, Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. And again, not my absolute favorite album by Pink Floyd. I've got others, but this album here in and of itself, and we know the history of it. I mean, it's spent over 700 plus weeks on the Billboard charts alone. I think it's the longest running album on the charts itself. It's broken numerous, records and things of that nature. So this is why it's probably been reissued so many times. And of course, it's just sold an astronomical amount. But we're going to go back to the original 1973 gatefold vinyl, which I have. And, this might have actually been the first way that I had picked it up, because back when in the early 90s, when vinyl was just tanking and wasn't doing much, go to the record store and get them for $1 a piece. And there was a record store I could go to and actually get 10 for $1. So a dime. Don't actually know what I paid on this one, but this one here, I have a second copy of it because once I found out that there was 2 posters and a sticker in it, I had to find a copy that had that. And so I do have that one in this one here. It's the sticker that comes with it. I'm not going to open up the posters, but just showing you that it does come with 2 posters. And it's still the gatefold, and it's still a copy from 1973 and so forth. But even at that time, when I bought that, it was only $4.99 for that. So I'm quite sure it goes for more today, but at that time, that was a inexpensive thing. And then in 1992, a 20th anniversary edition of it came out in this clamshell style box that had postcards on the front of it, booklet that's with it, and then the CD was actually inlaid on the bottom of this. And so this was the first CD edition and first Pink Floyd album that I owned, at least on CD, even if I owned the vinyl before, and I can't really remember which way it went. So I got that 20th anniversary edition of it. Then, of course, picked up a remastered copy of it in 2011. These are beautiful. Love the sound quality of these. Just a case in point where a company and or band, however you want to think of it, did a beautiful job doing the remasters. But aside from that, I also have the immersion box for Dark Side of the Moon, which has the alternate album cover work that's on this. And this one here, I think also in 2011, around that time frame when this came out. So in all, 4 versions of Dark Side of the Moon. And I think going back, I again may have had a standard copy on CD or jewel case edition of it. A lot of these are that. I had early copies of these in the late 80s and early 90s. And then as these remastered editions and things came out, I got rid of those. So counts would be a little bit higher on some of these. Of course, if you add in the cassettes, because I started as a cassette person. but just pulling out CDs, box sets, things of that nature today. All right, another one that I've got multiple copies of, R.E.M. and Monster. So 1994 album, one of the classics from the band. Funny to say that now, because at that time, albums that had come much earlier in their career were classics, and ultimately the ones I've grown up on have now become classics. But at the time that the jewel case edition came out, and cool that it came with the orange inlay case there was a deluxe edition of it, a limited edition of it, book format. And if we slide this guy off here very carefully, little by little, and we can see inside here. So just a deluxe book version of it. No bonus tracks or anything extra like that on it, but they would do this for all of their releases. Every single one of their albums, except the last album, Uberlin. Or it's not called Uberlin. Uberlin was my favorite track off of that, but the last album did not get a deluxe edition. But then again, the band knew they were breaking up at that point, so maybe that's why. All right, and then we've got the 25th anniversary edition box set version of it that actually has two copies, the remastered and a remixed copy in here. So if we go back to all editions of the album, then there's actually 4 of them in here with that. So, you know, and it's funny because I didn't think about any of this until I got ready to film this video, and then it kind of blew my mind how many bands, albums that I have that have multiple copies. And this is just some of them. Like, I've got that same thing going on for Green, Out of Time, and you just keep going. I have the individual jewel case, the deluxe editions, and then when they've been doing these box sets, I've now got those. So at least 3 copies of all the later day era R.E.M. albums. All right, we're gonna wrap up with Whitesnake, Slide It In. This was the original 1984 edition of the album itself, and you can see the artwork on that. But in 2009, they put out this edition of it. See, alternate album art on it, which is pretty cool. But the thing that I really liked about it, not only is it remastered, but the track listing is different. I think it's a UK track listing on this one versus the US edition of it. But that was cool to me to get it different. You know, this kicks off with Slide It In, but this kicks off with Gambler. So different album art, different track listing, and on top of it being remastered, made owning extra copies of that worthwhile for me. Plus, then you throw in the box set edition of this. And this one here's a massive one here. We've got 6 CDs and a DVD, so 7 discs inside here. But like some of these other box sets, this has a US remix 35th anniversary edition, an original UK mix 35th anniversary edition, and the 35th anniversary remix done in 2019. 3 copies in here, 2 copies in here, 5 copies of this album I now own. So this one's right up there with Def Leppard and Hysteria. And for the Whitesnake one, I've got multiple Whitesnake albums done the same way as David Coverdale's been putting out those boxes. So there you go, 6 albums that I've got multiple copies of in just the different versions and so forth over the years and stuff. Hopefully it was cool for you to see some of that stuff, and of course trigger in your mind ones that you've got like that. What album do you own the most copies of? Leave a comment in the below. Let me know all of that. That'd be pretty cool to have a conversation on those sort of things. And take care. Have a great one. Keep collecting. Buy more of the same album. Do whatever you got to do, but have fun. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.